You know that feeling when everything becomes too much and you just stop? Not in a dramatic way, not with tears or panic, but quietly, like someone turned down the volume on your entire life. Your body is still there moving through the motions, but inside you've gone somewhere far away, somewhere dim and foggy where nothing can quite reach you. Your mind that was racing just moments ago suddenly feels thick and slow, like you're trying to think through cotton wool. You sit at your desk or lie in your bed, and the simplest tasks, things you do every single day without thinking, suddenly feel impossible, like someone's asking you to climb a mountain when you can barely lift your head. You stare at your phone or your computer screen, and the words blur together. And you know you should respond to that message or finish that task or make that decision, but your brain just won't cooperate. It's like all the connections have been severed, and you're left floating in this strange, heavy silence. And the worst part, the part that makes you feel so guilty and ashamed, is that from the outside you might look fine, maybe a little quiet or tired, but fine, while inside you've completely disappeared, retreated so far into yourself that even you can't find you anymore. This shutdown, this complete withdrawal from life, when stress becomes overwhelming, it's not laziness and it's not weakness, and it's not you giving up or being dramatic or failing at being human. What's happening in those moments is actually one of the most ancient hardwired survival responses your nervous system possesses, and it's trying, in its own clumsy way, to protect you from what it perceives as unbearable danger. When your anxious mind encounters more stress than it knows how to process, when the demands of life pile up faster than you can sort through them, when your emotions flood your system with more intensity than you can safely feel, your brain makes a split-second decision that fighting or fleeing won't work, that there's no way to win and no way to escape. And so it chooses the third option, the one we don't talk about as much, freeze. It shuts down all non-essential systems, dulls your emotions, slows your thoughts, and pulls you deep inside yourself where nothing can hurt you, at least not as much. This is the same response that helps animals survive when a predator has them cornered, when fighting back would be fatal and running is impossible. They go limp and still and wait for the danger to pass. Your brain, your beautiful, anxious, overprotective brain, is doing exactly the same thing, except the predator isn't a physical threat. It's the mounting pressure of expectations and deadlines and responsibilities and emotions and the terrifying possibility of failure or disappointment or being too much or not enough. For those of you with anxious minds, shutdown happens more easily and more often because your nervous system is already running on high alert most of the time, scanning for danger, anticipating problems, trying to stay one step ahead of disaster. When you're already operating near your capacity, just managing daily anxiety, it doesn't take much additional stress to push you over the edge into complete overwhelm. Maybe it's one more email that needs a response, one more decision you have to make, one more person disappointed in you, one more thing you forgot to do, and suddenly the whole system just says, "No, I can't, I'm done," and shuts everything down. The cognitive overload is real and physical. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning and decision-making and rational thought, it literally starts to go offline when you're flooded with too much stress, which is why you can't think clearly, can't make even simple decisions, can't remember what you were supposed to do or why it mattered. Your working memory shrinks to almost nothing, your ability to focus scatters, and you're left in this fog where everything feels equally urgent and equally impossible. But it's not just cognitive, it's deeply emotional too. When you're prone to anxiety, you often feel everything more intensely than others, and you've probably learned over the years that big emotions can be dangerous, that showing too much feeling makes people uncomfortable, that breaking down or melting down has consequences. So you've developed this incredible ability to hold everything in, to keep functioning even when you're drowning inside, to smile and nod and say you're fine when you're absolutely not fine. But emotions don't just disappear when you suppress them. They build up like pressure in a closed system, and eventually something has to give. Shutdown is what happens when your emotional system reaches capacity, and your brain decides the safest thing to do is to stop feeling altogether, to numb everything, to create distance between you and your own experience because being present for it is simply too much. You might notice that before shutdown happens, there's often this moment of emotional flooding where everything hits you at once, sadness and fear and anger and shame all tangled together. and it's so overwhelming that your system just pulls the emergency brake and shuts it all down, leaves you in this strange, empty, disconnected state where you can't feel much of anything at all. For many people with anxiety, especially those who grew up in environments where it wasn't safe to express emotions or needs, where being upset was met with anger or dismissal, or where you learned that your feelings were burdensome to others, shutdown can also be a learned pattern, a way you protected yourself as a child that your nervous system still reaches for automatically when things get hard. If you learned early on that showing distress didn't bring comfort, but instead made things worse, your brain figured out that disappearing, going quiet, shutting down, was the safest option. And now, years later, even though you're an adult in different circumstances, that same pattern activates whenever you're stressed, pulling you into shutdown before you even realize it's happening. There's often trauma woven into these patterns, not always big T trauma, not always the kind of experiences people recognize as traumatic, but the accumulation of moments where you needed help and didn't get it, where you tried to express yourself and were shut down, where you learned that being yourself in your full intensity was somehow too much or wrong. Perfectionism plays a role too, that relentless internal pressure to do everything right, to never make mistakes, to meet impossibly high standards that you'd never expect from anyone else, but somehow expect from yourself. When you're carrying that kind of pressure, every task becomes loaded with the weight of potential failure. And the fear of not doing something perfectly can be so paralyzing that your brain chooses to do nothing at all, to shut down rather than risk getting it wrong. It's almost like your mind is saying, if I can't do it perfectly, if I can't guarantee success, then it's safer to not try, to disappear, to go offline. And then, of course, the shutdown itself becomes another source of shame and self-criticism, because now you're not just worried about failing at the task, you're also failing at even trying. And the guilt and frustration with yourself just deepens the shutdown, creates this cycle that's so hard to break out of. What's happening in your body during shutdown is that your nervous system has shifted into what's called dorsal vagal activation, a state where your parasympathetic system essentially hits the brakes too hard, slowing everything down, conserving energy, making you feel heavy and tired and disconnected. Your heart rate might slow, your breathing becomes shallow, your muscles feel weak or unresponsive, and there's this profound sense of collapse, like your whole system is giving up. It's the opposite of the fight or flight response, where everything speeds up and you're flooded with energy and adrenaline. Instead, everything slows down and dulls, and you feel almost sedated, like you're moving underwater. And here's what's important to understand. This is not you being lazy or unmotivated or weak-willed. This is a biological state, a nervous system response that's happening beneath your conscious control. And you can't just think your way out of it or force yourself to snap out of it through willpower alone. So what do you do when you notice yourself shutting down, when you recognize that foggy, disconnected, can't quite function feeling creeping in? The first and most important thing is to pause and acknowledge what's happening without judgment, to say to yourself, even just silently in your own mind, I'm shutting down right now, my nervous system is overwhelmed. This is a stress response, not a personal failing. That simple act of recognition, of naming what's happening with compassion instead of criticism, can start to create a tiny bit of space between you and the shutdown, can remind you that you're not broken, you're just stressed. Take a moment right now. If you're feeling any of that shutdown energy as you watch this, and just notice it, notice where it lives in your body. Notice what it feels like without trying to fix it or push it away, just acknowledging that it's there and that it makes sense that it's there given what you've been dealing with. And then very gently, very slowly, start to bring your awareness to your breath. Not try to breathe deeply or correctly, not doing any complicated breathing technique. Just noticing that you're breathing, feeling the air moving in and out, placing one hand on your chest or your belly if that feels okay, and just being with that rhythm for a few moments. You're not trying to change anything yet, you're just reconnecting to the most basic, reliable thing your body does, which is breathe. Shutdown happens when you feel unsafe, when your system perceives threat. So the work is not to force yourself back into action, but to gently, gradually help your nervous system feel safe enough to come back online. And breath is the bridge between your conscious mind and your automatic nervous system. It's the one thing you can intentionally influence that also influences your stress response. As you breathe, start to bring your awareness to physical sensations, not emotions yet, just simple physical things. the feeling of your body against the chair or bed, the temperature of the air on your skin, the weight of your clothes, the sounds in the room around you. This is grounding, bringing yourself back into your body and the present moment, reminding your nervous system that right here, right now, in this specific moment, you're safe. Shutdown pulls you out of the present, sends you into that foggy elsewhere where time feels strange and nothing feels real, and grounding brings you back not forcefully, but gently, like coaxing yourself out of hiding. You might wiggle your toes or press your feet into the floor, feeling that solid contact. Or you might look around the room and name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, not in a rigid way, but just as a gentle way to remind yourself that you exist in a body, in a space, in this moment. And here's something that might feel counterintuitive, but is so important. Give yourself permission to be shut down, to need this pause, to not be okay right now. So much of the suffering in shutdown comes not from the shutdown itself, but from the guilt and frustration and shame about being shut down. The voice in your head that says you should be able to handle this, you should be stronger, you should just push through. But that voice, that harsh inner critic, it's part of what's keeping you stuck, because your nervous system can't relax and come back online when you're internally attacking yourself for being in this state. So try as much as you can to soften toward yourself, to speak to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you love who's struggling, with gentleness and understanding and patience. You might say to yourself, this is really hard right now, and it makes sense that I'm overwhelmed. I'm doing the best I can with what I have. It's okay to need a break. It's okay to not be functioning at full capacity. I don't have to be perfect or superhuman. As you sit with yourself in this softer way, you might notice emotions starting to surface, maybe sadness or frustration or fear. And if that happens, try to let them be there without immediately pushing them away or shutting down again. You don't have to dive into them or analyze them or fix them. Just acknowledge them. Give them a little bit of space to exist. Sometimes shutdown lifts a bit when we allow ourselves to feel even a small amount of what we've been holding back, when we stop using all our energy to keep everything contained. You might feel the urge to cry, and that's okay. Tears are a release, a way your body processes stress and emotion. Or you might just feel heavy and sad, and that's okay too. You don't have to perform recovery or healing. You can just be where you are. If you've been shut down for a while, maybe hours or days, you might be feeling that particular kind of guilt that comes from not responding to messages, not doing the things you said you do, disappointing people, letting life pile up around you. That guilt is real and it's heavy. But it's also important to recognize that you didn't choose to shut down. You didn't decide to make things harder for yourself. Your nervous system made a call based on the information it had about your stress levels and capacity. You're not a bad person for needing to withdraw. You're not failing at life because you couldn't keep up. You're a human being with limits. And those limits deserve to be respected by others and by yourself. The people in your life who truly care about you, they'll understand. And if they don't, that's information about their capacity, not your worth. One of the saddest parts of shutdown is the isolation, the way it makes you feel like you have to hide, like you can't let anyone see you in this state because they'll judge you or be disappointed or think less of you. You might mask your shutdown, putting on a smile and pretending everything's fine even when you're barely holding on. Or you might withdraw completely, avoiding contact with people so they won't notice that you're not okay. But hiding makes the shutdown worse because it cuts you off from connection and support. It reinforces the belief that you have to handle everything alone, that your struggles are shameful and have to be kept secret. If there's someone in your life who's safe, someone who's proven themselves to be kind and non-judgmental, it might help to let them know, even just a little bit, that you're going through a hard time, not asking them to fix it, just sharing the reality of your experience, so you don't have to carry it completely alone. But even if you don't have that person right now, even if you're navigating this by yourself, you can still create that sense of companionship and care internally by treating yourself as someone worth caring for, by being the safe, understanding presence for yourself that you wish someone else could be. This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's about genuine self-compassion, recognizing your own suffering and responding to it with kindness rather than criticism. You might place your hand on your heart and feel the warmth there, or you might wrap your arms around yourself in a gentle hug. Physical reminders that you're here, that you matter, that you deserve gentleness. When you're ready, not before you're ready, but when you feel even a tiny bit more settled in your body, You can start to think about what very small thing might help you move just slightly out of shutdown, not jumping back into everything, not trying to catch up on all the tasks you've been avoiding, but choosing one tiny, manageable thing that feels almost easy. Maybe it's getting a glass of water, or opening the curtains to let in light, or sending one simple text message, or just standing up and stretching your body. The key is small, so small that your nervous system doesn't perceive it as a threat, doesn't go back into overwhelm. This is about building momentum gently, proving to yourself that you can take action, even tiny action, without collapsing. And if you do that one small thing and then need to rest again, that's okay. You're not trying to be productive. You're trying to slowly, carefully help your system shift out of freeze and back into a state where functioning feels possible. Over time, as you practice noticing your shutdown patterns and responding to them with compassion and grounding rather than criticism and force, you start to build a different relationship with stress and overwhelm. You start to recognize the early warning signs, that feeling of things piling up, that sense of emotions getting too big, that mental fogginess that signals you're approaching your limit, and you can intervene earlier, taking breaks before you hit full shutdown, setting boundaries before you're completely depleted, asking for help before you're drowning. You learn that shutdown isn't something that happens to you randomly, but a predictable response to specific conditions, usually too much stress without enough support, too many demands without enough recovery, too much emotion without enough processing. And when you understand the pattern, you can start to work with it instead of against it, can start to build in the rest and recovery and emotional space that prevents shutdown from being your only option. It's also worth recognizing that some shutdown is actually necessary and protective, that sometimes withdrawing from the world for a bit is exactly what you need to recover from stress and trauma, that not every moment of life requires you to be on and available and functioning. There's a difference between healthy rest and being stuck in chronic shutdown, and learning to distinguish between them is part of the work. Healthy rest is when you consciously choose to step back, to be less available, to slow down because you recognize you need it, and you do so without guilt, trusting that taking care of yourself is not selfish, but essential. Chronic shutdown is when you're stuck in that collapsed state not by choice, but because your nervous system won't let you out, when you want to engage with life but can't, when the fog won't lift no matter how much you rest. If you find yourself in chronic shutdown, if this has become your default state rather than an occasional response to acute stress, it might be helpful to reach out for support from a therapist or counselor who understands trauma and nervous system dysregulation, someone who can help you safely process what's keeping you stuck and build new pathways back to engagement. But wherever you are in your relationship with shutdown, whether this is something you experience occasionally or something you're currently stuck in, please hear this. You are not broken, you are not defective, you are not too much or not enough, you are a sensitive, intelligent, caring person whose nervous system is doing its absolute best to keep you safe in a world that often feels overwhelming and demanding and scary. The shutdown is not a personal failing, it's a message, a communication from your body to your conscious mind saying, I need help, I need rest, I need things to slow down, I need you to be gentle with me. And the most powerful thing you can do is learn to listen to that message with compassion instead of criticism. To respond to your own overwhelm the way you'd respond to a frightened child, not with frustration or demands, but with understanding and safety and the promise that it's okay, that you're going to be okay, that you don't have to do this alone, that rest is not laziness and struggling is not weakness and needing help is not failure. It's just being human, beautifully, imperfectly, courageously human.